for people to join in. There's a farm. Everybody's
on a Friday night after a long week of work. Who wants to listen to a lawyer? Only a glutton for punishment.
That's a good opening. We'll take it.
Painful. Have to listen to some boring lawyer on a Friday evening, date night.
Well, not really. You're not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer, you're just boring.
That's true, I agree.
Okay. All right. So I think we're all set. We will begin. Thank you for those joining in right now.
Only for you, Sarvatma. Only for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute you, I think. This is you may have to get used to this type of dialogue, as Amarendra Prabhu and I have been close friends for a very long time, probably too long, and there may be some banter mixed with the events that happen, because I'm particularly interested, and I'm sure most of you may be as well, in some of the somewhat hidden history of ISKCON, that behind the scenes, what really happened? How are we still a movement after so many lawsuits that threaten to take all money and properties away, and the devotees being discouraged, and the programmers and anti-cult movements, and lawsuits, kidnappings? I mean, there were so many things. And Amarendra Prabhu was on the good side.
Yeah.
All the time. He's been actually, as I would like to call, the unsung hero of our ISKCON society, because like a legal guardian dog, he has defended the rights of, and his specialty is constitutional law, First Amendment. So this is a very difficult service, to try to work through the legal jargon and the bureaucracy and the prejudice and the ignorance, how actually we are a bona fide spiritual movement. So I'm gonna first I want to ask you,
The answer to everything you just mentioned is two words: Srila Prabhupada.
yes.
That's the answer to that. That's how did we get through everything? How did we do this? How we do that? One answer: Srila Prabhupada. Pure and simple.
Do you have a volume button that you can use on your computer?
Yeah, you want it louder?
Yes, please.
All right, let me see. It's almost up. It's almost up at the there. That's 100%.
Okay, that's very good. So let's go to the beginning. You met Gargamuni? That was the first devotee you met?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I hope I can remember that far back. It was about 50 years ago I'm in Alachua now, which is about 10 miles north of Gainesville, where the Krishna House and the Krishna Lunch program are famous, and the University of Florida. In 1970, I was a student at the university, along with many other illustrious people: Gayatri, Pushta Krishna, Raghavendu, Veer Krishna Maharaj, Gaudidas. There were a whole group of people, students, and we were all friends actually in college. Raghavendu and Pushta Krishna, we were fraternity brothers before we were godly. So we all knew each other, and we all hung around each other, and we read mystical books and speculate and do this and that. And then one day a Swami showed up on the where they do Krishna lunch. He just showed up, and he was sat down under a tree, which is still there, and he chanted. He drew a crowd, and then when he had a nice crowd to give a little lecture, and then shot him he could find and put together. Apple, banana, and he built up a big following. I mean, dozens, hundreds of students were trying to listen to him speak every day on the plaza. So that's how we met him. That's where I met him. Practically in the same spot where Srila Prabhupada came in 1971 and spoke on this. So he was staying at different, he was a sannyasi. Him and Vishnu John and Brahmananda had been traveling together. I had gotten into a little trouble at New Vrindavan a few months before that, which I won't get into that. But anyway, they were sent out on the road by Srila Prabhupada, and they were hitchhiking with their robes and dundas and bed sheets all over the country, and they went down to Miami. And they were camping out in Peacock Park, which was the big hippie park back then, in Coconut Grove. And they actually got caught in a hurricane and had to take shelter under a bench and ride out the hurricane. Then I guess the GBC sent a president down there to take over and to start a real temple. And when that devotee got there, Gargamuni came up here to Gainesville, Brahmananda went to Tallahassee, and Vishnu John went to Austin. And Vishnu John made a lot of devotees in Austin also, Adi Dev and Shankar Shan and Murli Das, the sculptor. He made a whole group of devotees there. So they split up and came to these different places and got these places started. Tallahassee's still going today. Gainesville, of course, is still going strong, and Austin is still going strong. And he was those three sannyasis were the ones who got these places started.
Well, what convinced you, besides the exotic nature of the Swami and that you were reading pseudo or spiritual books? What was the clinch?
Well, I was on a particular type of journey for several months. A mystical type of journey. I was looking for the absolute truth. I was looking for God myself. I was very angry and about everything that was going on in the country with Nixon, the president, and the Vietnam War, and all the corruption.
You haven't changed much.
That's true. I'm getting crankier as I get older. So, but I was very mad then. You didn't want to know me back then. I was very mad, angry. I wanted to find God because I was going to give him a piece of my mind and say, why are you letting him go on here? I wasn't going to ask him what's the absolute truth. I was going to say, how can you let this happen? Why don't you stop all this insanity? So I was very angry, and I was looking for God in order to chastise him. And that anger got me into a little trouble over in St. Petersburg at an anti-war demonstration, where there were several hundred anti-war demonstrators in Stroud Park on the water in Tampa, or St. Pete. And it was a setup. The cops said, hidden behind all these buildings, any cop park. A professor from the university was talking about the Vietnam War, and he said, it's time to stop the goddamn war. That's what he said. And with that, all these cops came out from their hiding places and grabbed the speaker and pulled him down off the podium. And that started a riot in the park. And people were throwing things. You've probably seen a lot of movies and old newsreels, and that's what it was like. And so this guy was walking towards me. When it started, I went right over to the black military. They were called Jomo. I said, me and Gayatri were there, and Raghavendra was there, but he was off doing something. To this day, I don't know what he was doing. He was swimming, I think. So me and Gayatri went over next to the black militants. We said, oh, the cops aren't going to mess with these guys. So we thought we were safe. And so there was a guy walking towards me, right towards me. And there was a cop coming up behind him, and he didn't know about it. And the cop, police officer of the law, raised his billy club, and he was about ready to come right down and smash this guy. And before he could do that, I stepped in between them, so to speak. I picked up the cop and I threw him to the ground. And by the time he hit the ground, I had about 10 cops on top of me, wailing away, kicking, bashing me with their billy clubs and their fists. And I actually had an out-of-body experience at that point because I was still fighting back. I was resisting. And then all of a sudden I was up in the air and I was looking down and I said, oh, God, there's like 10 cops on top of me. If they'll do something, they're going to kill me. So when I saw that, I immediately surrendered and went to jail. And because of some technical legal issues called double jeopardy, which means you can't be charged with two crimes based upon the same set of facts, they arrested me on a misdemeanor and a felony. And I went to trial on the misdemeanor and a little slap on the wrist and probation and a little fine. Then it came time to go to court on the big charge of a felony, which could have sent me to prison. And a new case had just come out, and my lawyer went to the judge and said, this case has to be dismissed. And the judge dismissed it on that principle of double jeopardy. Whereas all the other people that got arrested with me, or I with them, they went to prison. That professor that started that they used as a pretext to start the riot, he went to prison for a year. And Brahmatirtha knows his family very well, and he ruined his life. He never got another teaching position again. But Krishna saved me. And I knew at that point, well, it's either going to be, I'm going to pick up guns and bombs and go down that road, and lose and get killed, or I got to find something else. I got to find a new way to go.
Is that how you started, contemplated studying law?
That was a whole different thing later on. But I did realize that, of course, we all wanted to start a revolution. That's what we were all trying to do. We thought we were going to overthrow the government, get rid of all the karmi demons, and take over and run the country. But I realized that was not going to happen. So I had to look for an alternative. And we were already, reading books like, Herman Hesse and Stranger in a Strange Land, and, all these Ferlinghetti and Ken Kesey and all the hip stuff out of Greenwich Village. And Aja and I were actually reading these Russian mystics, Ouspensky and Gurdjieff were the names. And I went, and from there I said, well, I'm going to look for another path. And I tried Buddhism for a while, and I said, no, don't like this. I'm not made for this stuff. And then a little in person, and then right after that, Gargamuni showed up. It wasn't long after that riot in Straub Park that Gargamuni campus, only 7 8 months later. And he said, I'll never forget it. He said he was right in the plaza next to the graduate library that's still there to this day. That's where Prabhupada spoke when he was here, right in front of the graduate library. He said, there's millions of books in this library, literally millions of books. But where is that one book that will teach you about the soul, who you are, and what happens at the time of death? And when he said that, everything just immediately clicked. I said, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Why do we have to die? because that was plaguing me. Why are we here if we just have to die after such a short amount of time? We're here for the bat of an eyelash and then we're gone. I mean, why even come here in the first place? And then it's miserable while we're here on top of it. So I said to find out where do we go at the time of death? And that was the first thing he answered for me. That, we're not the body. We transmigrate according to our activities in this life. We take a body in our next life, and it just resonated so heavily that I was hooked at that one. At that point, I was already done for. I was a devotee.
Let me ask you a couple of questions, and then we can fast forward a little bit. Did you start chanting right away?
No. We would chant in the plaza. We'd sing. He'd chant on the kartals, and we'd have kirtan. But we weren't chanting on beads or anything at that point. We didn't have beads. We didn't even know what they were. So anyway, so Gardamuni did that for a few weeks in October of 1970, November, and every night he'd stay in a different place. And me and Pushta Krishna would go try to find him, make sure it was okay. It was getting cold, November, it was cold out. And one night we'd find him staying in an attic somewhere. One night we ran into him and he was in somebody's utility room next to the hot water heater to stay warm. He had no blankets, he had no pillows, no heating. And so I couldn't take it anymore. I said, okay, why don't you just move in with me and Gayatri? So he did. We had a little apartment a couple blocks from campus, and he moved in, and that was the first Krishna house. That was the first Krishna lunch and breakfast and dinner, because in just a month or two, we had over 100 people a day coming to that little apartment, just a couple blocks from campus. And he still never told us what to do. He never really emphasized the regulative principles and said, don't do this, don't do that. He just said chant, which we did start doing, and take prasadam, which we definitely started doing, and read the books. There weren't many available, but we had those blue Gitas at the time. And, from there, people just started joining left and right. We had this huge lunch program every day with 50, 60 people, 30, 40 people at night for dinner, and maybe 20 or 30 early in the morning for breakfast. And then Prabhupada in February of 1971 sent Gardamuni to East Pakistan to preach. And that's a really wonderful letter that he wrote to Gardamuni in 1971, and asking him, not ordering him, asking him to go to Pakistan. And Prabhupada's mood in that letter is so sweet, so humble. And especially if you knew what the trouble that they had been in just a few months earlier, you would have never known it. It was like two old friends speaking intimately with each other. Prabhupada said, my people here in India asked us if we have anything in Pakistan. And there were some Gaudiya Math people there, but they hadn't done much. And Prabhupada says in the letter, he says, so I thought to myself, why not? If we can do something in Pakistan, the whole world will take notice to Hare Krishna's having a successful temple in Pakistan. That will get everyone's attention. Because I was devastated when he ordered Gardamuni to go to Pakistan. We weren't initiated. We'd only been there for 2 or 3 months at the most. I was thinking, doesn't Prabhupada know what's going on here? Somebody should tell him. Look at all these students that are joining. Look at all this prasadam that we're distributing. Isn't Prabhupada aware of this? And then later on, when I read Prabhupada's letter, he said the whole world will take notice of this. It will solve the partition issue, and the whole world will be amazed at our success. And we're in this little frog pond here in Gainesville, and Prabhupada was thinking on a global level. He was thinking of world conquest and what impact Krishna consciousness could have on the entire planet. And so when I saw that, I felt stupid and idiotic, of course. You know, I was puffed up being a student and, you know, joining here. And later on, I could really appreciate Prabhupada's mission and what he was trying to do as revealed to Gargamuni in that letter. Are you talking or chanting?
No, somebody came to the door looking for Ramapad Swami. Sorry, but I was listening.
Okay.
What happened? What happened then? He left. Gargamuni left, and there
He
was
left
Bhakta David in charge of a program, right?
Yeah, he left in February. Pushta Krishna was a student at the university with a 3.99 something average, on his way to become a superstar, rock star doctor. And he dropped out like just a couple of weeks before graduation and shaved up. And, I remember the day I took them to Jacksonville and dropped him, Gargamuni and Pushta Krishna off at the Interstate 95, and they left. And that was that. Gargamuni never gave it a second thought. He never wrote back to Prabhupada and argued or said, oh, maybe I should stay here. He just immediately, without even giving it a second thought, made arrangements to go. Because Prabhupada said, if you can't raise the money, then I will personally pay for your expenses to go. And at the same time, he sent Brahmananda to West Pakistan. Shortly after that, the Bangladesh Civil War broke out. So Pushta and Gargamuni got caught in the middle of the civil war between India and Pakistan.
Yes,
they were almost murdered. Which true story. They came within an inch of their life, losing their lives.
Brahmananda told me the story.
Well, Brahmananda was in West Pakistan. He was safe. The Indians of West Pakistan had tipped him off. There's going to be trouble. You better get out of here. So he got out right away. But Gargamuni didn't make it out in time. And Pakistan was much worse than West Pakistan. A few years later, I was curious about it, and I looked up some old newspaper articles, and I saw a quote from a Pakistani general. He said, if we slaughter 3 million of these Bengalis, they will never give us any trouble anymore. And they did. There was a Hindu dormitory at one of the colleges in Dhaka. I think it was the University of Dhaka. There were 700 Hindus, Indian Hindus living in the, and they murdered every one of them. The Pakistanis murdered every single one of them. And ultimately, the total was 3 million. It was genocide. And they did murder 3 million. And Gargamuni and Pushta just made it out by the skin of their teeth. And Gargamuni tells the story when he got to India. I think Prabhupada was in Mumbai, and Prabhupada saw him. He just immediately got up and just grabbed Gargamuni and squeezed him as hard as he could. Gargamuni said he felt all his simple reactions just escaping out of him. He was so relieved that they were okay, because there had been reports that some Hare Krishnas had been murdered in the Civil War, and Prabhupada was very worried. An interesting little thing also was that Prabhupada said, go through America on an American passport. Don't go through India. Go through America. And that's what saved them. That when they were about to be executed by a firing squad, at the last second, they realized, oh, Americans. And because they were Americans, and Pakistan and America were allies back then, and India and Russia, interestingly enough, were allies back then, they let them go because they were Americans. And they didn't want to cause an international incident with killing American citizens. So that Prabhupada hadn't told them how to do that, they would be dead. They would have been killed. But Prabhupada knew exactly what he was doing, and he saved them. And then they were left, and we were left behind. He put me in the charge of the temple, Bhakta David, or David Prabhu. I think we called each other in those days. Alan Prabhu, Paul Prabhu. We call the women gopis. it was a little amusing, but he put me in charge of the temple, and I tried to do my best, but had no idea what I was doing. I had read the Shriyas Upanishad and some of the Bhagavad Gita. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. And and then we got kicked out because there were so many people coming, still coming, because Gargamuni trained Gayatri how to cook. She would help him cook every day, and that's where she learned to cook originally. And then, of course, later on, became one of the best cooks, most famous cooks. She invented Garanga potato, and she cooked the banana bread. I was just talking to somebody about this today, jumping a little bit ahead, because this 50th anniversary of Prabhupada's visit to New Vrindavan for his Vyas Puja and Janmashtami at New Vrindavan is coming up in this year.
Yes.
He was there in 1972. It'll be the 50th anniversary of that visit to New Vrindavan, which he characterized with the label Bhagavad Dharma discourses. And every day he was lecturing on top of one of the hills there, and there was a big pandal, and there were hundreds of devotees there from all over the country. And so on his Vyasa Puja, Gayatri baked him a banana bread with, I think Mangalananda helped her or whatever, and they made it in baked it in one of those outdoor brick ovens that New Vrindavan was famous for. And it came out great. It took like several brahmacharis to bring it up the hill on a palanquin. I think it took 4 brahmacharis to get it up the hill. So after the ceremonies, everybody made their offerings. They gave a piece of bread to cake to Prabhupada, and he was eating it. He was enjoying it. And as soon as that cake touched Prabhupada's lips, there were like hundreds of devotees there. They were like piranhas. They just jumped on that cake and devoured it faster than I've ever seen food devoured in my entire life. And everybody it was like a rugby match or a school of ravenous piranhas fighting. And then Prabhupada finished his piece of cake and he said, "Any more cake?" And everybody froze. Every devotee, and their mouths were puffed up with the cake that they'd been stuffing in, and they all froze. Everybody was just frozen. And they had to say, "Prabhupada, it's gone." Everybody was completely blown away. Oh no. But I didn't know this till a few years later, but actually Gayatri made another cake for him the next day or the day after, which they brought up to the house where he was staying, so that it was not subject to intervention by the devotees before it got there. And I guess he ate it and distributed it to people and so forth. But that was a very funny incident. And that's when Gayatri actually became very famous for that banana cake. Everybody all over the movement wanted her to make those cakes. And she became an amazing cook after that. But, because we were such new devotees, gradually people started leaving. Dear Krishna Maharaj went to Dallas. He wanted to be a school teacher. And this devotee wanted to join the road show. And this devotee, some of you may not know the road show. That was the first bus with Kirtananda and Vishnu John and some unbelievable book distributors. They came to Florida in 1971 for the first time. And just give you an idea who was on that bus with Kirtananda, Vishnu John, Hari Kesh, Kaladri, Pushkar. I mean, I can't even remember the characters that were on that bus. And there was another very exalted person on that bus, Shalavati, because they had the Radha Damodar deities, which you have there now in Gitanagari. They were traveling on the bus with Kirtananda and Vishnu John and all those devotees. And Shalavati was the head pujari in Los Angeles and had been trained personally by Srila Prabhupada in deity worship. How they got her to leave Los Angeles to go on that bus, it wasn't one of the fancy buses that Tamal Krishna Maharaj had later on. These were just old school buses. And she was I think she was might have been another woman on there, one of the ladies that was in the play that they were doing. But that was it. She was the only lady, and she was older than everybody else, and she had two boys. And yet she was so stoic that, her mind was focused strictly on taking care of Radha. And they were beautiful, just gorgeous deities. And she left for a while, but what I've seen, she's back in New Vrindavan now. Instead of being in her 80s, and Malati is taking care of her. And it's just, she was just such a wonderful, wonderful lady. That all the gorgeous deity worship in LA, even to this very day, it's the gold standard all over the movement, was done by Prabhupada himself. So they would come down to Florida all the time. And a lot of devotees would come down in the wintertime, especially the Sankirtan parties would all come down every winter. And so the devotees, that we made here in Gainesville, of course, before all that, okay. So they had just drifted away here and there. And then I asked Seth Rupa Maharaj, who was our GBC, I said, you got to do something. I can't do this. This is above my pay grade. I'm not qualified to, I don't know what to tell these devotees and how to inspire them to Krishna consciousness. So you have to send somebody here. And so that's when Hridayananda Maharaj and the Nanda Manjari came. That was like March or April of 1971. And they came, and then there was a renaissance again. Because that's when Acharya Dev was just learning all the Sanskrit verses that he recites like in like a machine gun, just one verse after another. He knows all these verses, but that's when he was learning it all. And every day, 24/7, all he would be doing is, studying Sanskrit and quoting verses and this and that. And the Nanda Manjari was doing the same thing. So we had an incredible training under him. We had a class in every single book every morning. And every time a new book came out, we added a class to the morning schedule. We didn't finish class until 9:30, 10 o'clock every morning. Isa Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Nectar Devotion. It was the best time of my life, literally. We're all just so happy to be learning our philosophy from one of the most intelligent philosophical devotees in the history of ISKCON. And he was the temple president here. But like many in positions of leadership in ISKCON, sometimes the philosophy becomes secondary to politics, that word. And he got a little ambitious, not in a bad way, but he wanted to move up. Gainesville was a pretty remote place. And one little thing I left out is that in July of 71, Prabhupada came here to Gainesville and spoke at the university. And this is before he'd ever been to Miami or Atlanta or New Orleans. And, he'd only been to a few temples in the United States at all. And yet he came to Gainesville, which had a population of about 30,000 people and 20,000 students at that time. But Prabhupada said, well, if we can get the university to give him some money, $1,000 to speak, he'll come. So when I had been, in addition to the anti-war stuff, or notwithstanding all the anti-war stuff, I was in a very powerful college fraternity. We had a lot of members, brothers, and they were very powerful. When I became a devotee, my fraternity brothers were the president of the student government, the editor of the Florida Alligator, the student newspaper, the chancellor of the honor court, and the chairman of the speakers bureau that brings speakers to campus. He was my friend and fraternity brother. So I went to him and I said, Ronnie, have this guru from India. He's a pure devotee. We'd like to bring him here to speak to the students. And can you give us the money for him to do that? So there was some politicking, and helped us up to a certain point, but eventually I had to negotiate things with this one girl that was in charge of the legislative committee that actually approved the money. And I remember one day I was in a room with her, and I got so angry, which was I was prone to do in those days, as exemplified by that anti-war demonstration previously. And so I said, "You're spending all this money." See, we were very hellfire and brimstone back then. But back then, it was weed-eating carmy demons. You're going to come back as a worm and stool. That's where you're preaching that stuff. Things that we never say anymore. And I got an argument with her, and I said, "You pay all these meat-eating dirt bags all this money to come to campus and speak. What do they do for the students? Can they liberate anyone? Can they help anybody become self-realized souls? No, they're just dogs. They're just a bunch of dogs. And here you have a pure devotee, and you won't give them a measly $1,000. You people are useless." And I got up, slammed went out, slammed the door, and went back to the temple. And I told Acharya Dave, I said, "Forget it. They're just a bunch of dogs. They're not going to give us the money." I said, "Oh, well, we tried." And a couple of days later, that same girl called and said, "Okay, we decided to give you the money." And that was a shock. Acharya Dave was in the middle of an arti, and I went in. They weren't, not that our artis were very elaborate then, to begin. There was no big deal to go in and interrupt an arti and say, "Hey, they're going to give us the money." And his jaw just fell open, because we only had about 2 weeks to get it together for his visit. This was in June of '71, and he was going to come in July. So we had to scramble like anything to get the temple ready, to make all the arrangements. So we were just like in a panic for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And he came in July, and he came to the temple room, and he first offered his obeisances to a painting of Panchatattva that Gayatri had painted. And we had it on top of the radiator, and that was our altar. But when Prabhupada saw it, he offered full obeisances, prostrated right on the floor to that painting. And I thought to myself, well, I guess Gayatri just punched her ticket back to Godhead. At least she's going to go. She'd made this painting, and Prabhupada just offered his obeisances to it. And then he spoke, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, it's close. He said, "I'm very pleased to be here in this very remote place, thousands of miles from the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal, India." Now, every place in America is technically remote from Mayapur and Navadvip and so forth. But to get here, Prabhupada had to fly to Atlanta and change planes in Atlanta, then fly into Jacksonville, and then we had to drive him 2 hours from Jacksonville through nothing but forest and wilderness from Jacksonville to Gainesville in those days. And I could just imagine what Prabhupada was thinking, looking around. He was in the middle of nowhere, the middle of this wilderness. So that by the time he finally got here, his first words were, "This very remote place." And so it was quite literally a very remote place. But he came, and he spoke at the university. He gave a arrival's address, which was very memorable. One thing that I heard him mentioning in a lecture recently is why there are so many young people in our movement, and there's not very many old people, although there is now, because some of us, we were young when we joined, but we're not so young anymore. So we do have some senior citizens here by the time factor, but nobody was joining at our age back then. And a reporter from the Gainesville Sun, who were very favorable to us, actually. The newspaper liked us, the radio station liked us. And she asked Prabhupada, "Why are there only young people in your movement? Where are all the old people?" And Prabhupada said, "Because this is the time. Why in the university do you see mostly young people? Because that is the time. It is too late for the old fools. Now, we know that we had some people that did join at other ages, at older ages from here and there, but it's the truth. I mean, in your college age, that's the time to really find the purpose of life. You have to do it then, before you get entangled any further in the material world. So after his arrival lecture, he took a little rest, and then he had darshan with some Indians and visitors. And then we went over to the campus where he spoke in the Plaza of the Americas on the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita on the Ashtanga Yoga system. And Prabhupada was lecturing fearlessly. And I was listening, and I didn't understand a thing he was saying. You know, I didn't understand the Ashtanga Yoga system. You do this, you do that, and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, how are these students ever going to understand what he's saying? This is so advanced. But afterwards, all the students, they came up and, oh, that was the best lecture I ever heard. That was the best thing I ever heard in my life. That was just so wonderful. They all understood and they all appreciated it. And afterwards, we went back to the temple for more darshan. And later that evening, there was a professor at the campus radio station. He was a journalism professor also. And when he heard that Prabhupada was coming, he was calling me every 5 minutes for Prabhupada to be on his show. He had an interview show every evening. His name was Mark David. He was just calling me every 5 minutes. Oh, please get the Swami. Please get Prabhupada to appear. I said, I'll do what I can, Mark. I can't make any promises. But finally, we spoke to Prabhupada's secretary, and he said, okay, Prabhupada will do it. And this guy was very happy when Prabhupada agreed to go on the TV show. And that was about 8 o'clock at night. And so we all went in, about 30, 35 devotees, and this man interviewed Prabhupada. I think he was a little bit intoxicated at the time. And he was asking Prabhupada all these provocative questions. He was trying to bait Prabhupada into saying something controversial. We have our Christian religion, our Jewish religion. Why are you here? We have our own religion. What do we need your religion for? And Prabhupada would not take the bait. And he said, I'm here because this is what my spiritual master told me to do. He said to spread Krishna consciousness in the Western countries. So I have come on the order of my Guru Maharaj, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Swami. And he said, you have got a God, that is okay. You worship your God. But of course, the kicker of all that when he was speaking to Christians was, Christ said, thou shalt not kill. So why are you killing? Commandment number 1, thou shalt not kill. And so Prabhupada just cut him to pieces. He couldn't get Prabhupada anything controversial. If you have a name of God, chant it. You become a devotee of God. You follow God's instructions. You're Christian or Muslim, doesn't matter. That's okay. We're not here to defeat your religion. And it was very, very, very successful. Prabhupada was teaching us how to preach, because this man brought up so many. Here in the South, we had a lot of trouble with Christians. I don't hope nobody gets offended with that, but these were the fundamentalist right-wing Christians that, we were devil worshipers and we worship idols and we were going to hell. They really, we'd go out on Sankirtan in Orlando or Jacksonville, and they'd go to the police and say, you got to put those people in jail. They're devil worshipers. They're heathen. And then we'd end up in jail. So, but Prabhupada would not take that bait. And he was just, everything was perfect. The way he responded to everything. And when he would make a point, we were behind the cameras, and he would kind of like, had a little twinkle in his eye from the camera lights, and his skin was beautifully golden under the lights. And every time he scored a point, so to speak, he would kind of glance over at us behind the camera, and he had a little twinkle in his eye and said, see, this is how you do it. And a little smile on his face every time he landed one of these heavyweight punches on this guy. And then afterwards, he asked us to chant, and we chanted for 10, 15 minutes. Got out of there 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and went back to the temple and got initiated around midnight. You know, because we didn't know he was leaving the next day. We, you know, some of us, myself, Gayatri, Bhagavat Maharaj, who's now Maharaj, he was there from New Orleans. Dharma Das from Miami was there. And we, you know, we wanted to get initiated. We were ready. And so he agreed very kindly to initiate us, like at midnight, 12:30 in the morning, he performed the initiation.
No fire sacrifice?
No, the fire sacrifice is the next day. But he chanted on the beads, he gave us all our names, and then answered some questions. You know, some nice questions that night. He was very patient, very loving father. That went on till 1:30 in the morning, and he took rest. And the next day he was on his way back to Jacksonville. Then
there was a story. There was a story with a Vyasasana, right?
Well, yeah, well, the Vyasasana had a life of its own. Yeah. I didn't know anything. I mean, Ananga Manjari and I were supposed to build the Vyasasana. And I was petrified that Prabhupada would sit on it and it would break. And he would fall off of it onto the floor. And I would go straight to hell. So we built that Vyasasana with heavy 2x6 planks and 2x4s and big clamps and screws and those big 16-point nails. It was built like a tank. It was not going to collapse. When Prabhupada, who might have weighed 115 pounds, got on it, that thing was not going to fall in. And it was just weighed a ton. So when we took Prabhupada to the airport, somebody had the idea, well, we should bring the Vyasasana to the airport also. Because you could go past security in those days. There's no TSA, there was no 9/11, so you could go right out to the gate. So we went out to the gate and we were having the kirtan, and there was a group of brahmacharis that were given the responsibility of getting the Vyasasana to the airport that Prabhupada would sit in while he was waiting for his flight. So we were waiting, and there was a kirtan, and I remember I had maneuvered myself right up to Prabhupada's lotus feet. I was right there. Oh man, I've really made it now. Prabhupada's lotus feet are just like inches away from me. I must be really advanced. Otherwise, how could I get this close to him? And then Sridananda Maharaj and the Ananga Manjari, they got some books, and a big crowd had formed at the gate, at the concourse. And they started distributing books and talking to people. And when Prabhupada saw them, he did not take his eyes off of them the rest of the time that he was in the airport. All he did was, I watched him. I was just watching him, and he had his eyes on them, and he was totally transfixed on them distributing his books. And I thought to myself at that point, okay, well, I get the message. If you really want to please Srila Prabhupada, you distribute his books. This stuff sitting at his feet, that doesn't get you very far. But if you really want to make some advancement, you distribute his books. That got his attention. And so it came time for him to board his flight. And as he was walking out the gate, here came the Vyasasana down the concourse, carried by 6, 7, 8 brahmacharis. They're running, and their dhotis are halfway falling off, and they're sweating, and their clothes are in shambles, and they're running down the concourse of this airport. And Prabhupada just kind of looked, and he just shook his head. He turned the other way and just got on the plane. He was thinking, who are these people? What are they doing? And he never sat in it again. That was it. But it was like a Keystones Cop thing, if you can imagine. running through the airport with this huge tank-like Vyasa sign, and Prabhupada just looking and shaking his head and said, I don't know who they are. I don't know what they're doing, and just getting on the plane, and then he flew away. That was it. So it was obviously a wonderful visit. Prabhupada was preaching the whole time. He was happy that the university had given him money. And, you know, my take on all that is that a lot of people have done a lot of work to make this Krishna lunch program as successful as it is today, where they're distributing over 1,000 plates of prasadam every day on campus. And there have been a lot of devotees that had built this program up. Daru Brahma held it together when everything else was falling apart all around them. I had left in 1978. I had decided to go to law school. Later on, after I was devotee, I decided to go to law school then. And so I was getting ready to leave, and after I left, and I'm not saying I was the person that was holding everything together, but things did kind of disintegrate. We had a beautiful property over on Depot Ave, 2 acres of land with a full sorority house and big trees. In 1977, we bought the Alachua farm, or land as it's called, where that temple is now, Radha Shamasundar, and the original Gornitai deities that we installed in 1974 in Gainesville. They were moved out here. And things just kind of like disintegrated for a while. And then a few people came in, and Brahmatirtha and Chari Dev and a few others came in and got it straightened out again, going in the right direction. And, you know, people like Daru Brahma, he was doing the whole thing himself. He was holding the whole lunch program. Everything else could fall apart, but we were not going to stop that lunch program on campus because it was so successful. And the students liked it so much. And Prabhupada liked it. And that was the heart and soul of our temple. So Daru Brahma kept it going single-handedly for several years. And then Sabyasachi came and actually, with his financial abilities, created a financial base, bought the properties where the Krishna house is now, turned the lunch program into a money-making operation. And then Kalakanta came and went to the next level, which is, you know, very wonderful where they are today. But in my view, this is all, you could not do this program the way it's done here anywhere on any other campus in the country. It's just too big. There's just too many logistics built into it. 1,500 plates a day. The meat vendors on campus are very unhappy about it. They're losing their business. People are becoming vegetarians or vegans. But the reason that this program has been so successful, in my opinion, is that by giving Prabhupada that money, the university got his blessing. He blessed this university and sanctified that area on campus where he spoke. And for over 50 years, we've had a couple of minor little legal skirmishes, and that's it. But I can tell you, I'm trying to, you know, get a UCLA open for a lunch program, and they're fighting us tooth and nail. It is a real battle, and the main reason it's a battle is because they know how popular the program is here, and they don't want all these students to stop buying hamburgers and all the meat products that they're selling to the students on campus. They're afraid of it. And that's all because Prabhupada's visit here, when he sanctified that place, and they gave him that dakshin, that money, that's the basis by which this program has become so successful over the years. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
It was supposed to be a conversation. Seems more like a soliloquy, and from my
Well, I'm stopping.
No,
interrupt anytime.
I have very little to say. I just wanted to move on to some other topics that are I consider also very important. Let's move on to the legal history or of what happened. What happened? Susan Murphy, Robin George. What happened?
Well, it came a point in time as the new religious movements in America. We weren't the only one. During the hippie era in the 60s, a number of new religions, the Moonies, the Scientologists, the Guru Maharajis, there were all these groups, religious groups, and the young people were joining these groups in droves. So in reaction to that, there came about what was referred to then as the anti-cult movement. And they had different tactics. They would kidnap their devotees. They had out of the temples, and they take them and try to what's called deprogram them, to convince them to undo. They thought we were all brainwashed, in other words, that we had been brainwashed by the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, and by the chanting, we were all under the influence of mind control. So they would kidnap devotees and deprogram them, or try to deprogram them. So out of that, there was a young girl in California, Robin George. She was 14 years old, and she wanted to be a devotee. So under normal circumstances today, we'd never do anything like that. We've learned our lesson. We get permission from the parents, et cetera, et cetera. But some people in California let her join their temple. And when the parents came to the temple, informed the authorities, she's a underage girl and you need to send her home. Instead of sending her home, they sent her from Laguna Beach to Mississippi, where she was hidden for a while. And then when they tracked her down to Mississippi, they sent her up to Canada by way of New York. So they finally, Prabhupada ordered Rameshwar or whoever, to send her back, make her go home. Give her back to the parents. So they made it, Brahmeshwar and others made the arrangements, and that's what we did. She didn't want to go back. It's not like she was here against her will. She wanted to be here. She wanted to be the devotee, but the parents had their legal rights over her, and they said, send her back. And so finally we sent her back. And then they turned around and they sued us. They sued the Los Angeles Temple. They sued Laguna Beach. They sued San Diego, Mississippi, New Orleans, New York, Canada, Toronto. And it was a serious lawsuit. And they accused us of brainwashing this girl by the mind control without physical restraint, non-physical brainwashing, that if you leave, you will come back as a worm and stool. But that's the reason that she stayed, because she was afraid in her next life, she would come back as a worm and stool. And that was called, they came up with a fancy name for that. The Patty Hearst lawyer, expert, Margaret Singer came up with this whole theory of brainwashing without physical coercion or restraint. And it went to trial in Orange County in 1983 in January. And in June of 1983, the jury awarded her $32 million in damages for being brainwashed, and the parents for being lied to and deceived, and disregarding their instructions. A jury awarded $32 million. Now, that was a lot of money back then. In 1983, $32 million was a lot of money. I think it's still a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Last time I checked. The judge knocked it down to about 10 million, but even that would have wiped out every single temple in North America. That would have finished off LA, finished off Laguna, finished off San Diego, New York. They would have been wiped out. I won't go into all the legal, infighting that was engendered by that case, but it went on for another 20 years. That's not why I went to law school. I was put in charge of that case. I was put in charge of managing that case and working on the First Amendment, freedom of religion issues and so forth, and also managing the other lawyers, hiring and managing lawyers on the other issues And that's not why I had gone to law school. I went to law school because there was a point starting in 1971 where ISKCON had a political party. It was called the In God We Trust Party. And that party was started when Prabhupada was traveling in Africa. Shama Sundar, who was his secretary at the time, would send a newsletter to all the temples, like every couple of days. Oh, Prabhupada went here, and this is what he said, and then he went there, and he did this and did that. So he was keeping everybody up to date on what Prabhupada was doing. And in one of those, in Africa someplace, Prabhupada said something about entering politics. So obviously, having been somewhat of a campus radical, political activist at the college, that's all I needed to hear. That was like music to my ears. That was an epiphany for me. Politics, I said, oh my God. So I ran for office in Gainesville for the city commission. And the Gainesville Sun, in a later campaign, was reminiscing about my platform. And my main qualification was that I was a disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and that's why people should vote for me. Because I was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. That was my platform. But you know, the people liked us. They appreciated our message of God-conscious leadership.
What percentage of the vote did you get?
In the beginning, very little, maybe 100, 200 votes. Later on, I got a lot more votes. Later on, and we're sending the clippings to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was encouraging us, myself, Balavanta, primarily. Balavanta ran for mayor of Atlanta, and Prabhupada was very happy about that. He was showing the news clippings to all the life members in India, and the encouragement was really, really wonderful that we're getting for Prabhupada. So in 1978, I ran for the state legislature. I think it was that or it's the state legislature here in Florida against an entrenched Democrat, and I got over 7,000 votes. There was no question. I was a notorious Hare Krishna. I was the first University of Florida student who became a devotee and went to class in my robes and shaved head. You know, just one day I was dressed like I am now, and the next day I showed up in class and my hair was gone and I was wearing robes. My anthropology teacher said, the professor said, you know, in anthropology, they go out and they study these cultures and these tribes in the Amazon and so forth, and they live with the natives and study this. So my anthropology teacher said, Mr. Lieberman, it seems you've joined the natives. And that was the last thing he ever said to me. Never said another word. But, you know, I had done that and was very well known here as the Hare Krishna. Having been in that fraternity I mentioned, where we had 200 members and anti-war stuff, where I became very notorious and well known at that point. So when I became a devotee, it was big news. It made a big sensation. And then later on, when I ran for political office and I was the Hare Krishna candidate, you know, I had a few things from the fourth canto from Preeti Maharaj and Parikshit Maharaj that we put together a platform, but my main thing was I was a Hare Krishna, simple living and high thing, and got over 7,000 votes. And the people really appreciated our message. But the Gainesville Sun, they wrote an editorial and they say, well, we really liked it, but you've got no material credibility. How are you going to fix the potholes and keep the lights on and get the garbage collected? You need some credibility, some material experience. I said, well, they like my message. They like not my message, like our message. They like our platform. So I'll just go to law school and become a lawyer. There's so many lawyer politicians, and then I'll have my, great resume. Oh, no, I'm just not just a Hare Krishna. I'm a lawyer too, see? So I decided to go to law school, and I did. In 1979, I went to law school down in Miami, and my plan was to go to law school, get my degree, and I was going to come back to Gainesville and pick up the political preaching, so to speak, where I left off. But I got out of law school, I thought, no, I need to get some experience. It's not enough to just have a degree. You have to have some experience with it. Well, at that time, ISKCON was opening up, Sankirtan spots all over the country. We had a law firm in Los Angeles that was very expert First Amendment lawyers. They were opening up fairs and airports and all kinds of facilities. And the books were just flying out like crazy. That's when ISKCON really went nuclear, so to speak, where the books were just flying out, and money was coming in. And so I thought, well, maybe I should work on some of these things for a while, get a little experience. Then I can go back and say, well, I'm not only a lawyer, but I'm a constitutional lawyer. I specialize in the First Amendment, freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and people will really respect me. And that was my plan. But I got out to LA in July of 1982. And in January of 1983, Robin George case went to trial. In June of 1983, we got hit with the $32 million jury verdict. And they needed somebody to take charge of that case and manage it and get it overturned. Now, I don't want to get too political here, but at that time, the rest of the movement was kind of like, when I went to law school, I just put on the blinders. I blocked everything out. I went to the temple on the weekends. I was living in Miami. I'd go to school every day, chant my rounds in the morning, go to school, study all weekend, Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, Passover, what's the other one? Yom Kippur, Christmas, Easter. I was studying in the library. I wanted to get out of there. And then the Robin George case hit, and they needed somebody to manage it. And everybody else, like all the GBCs and all the temple presidents, were very caught up in what is known today as the guru controversy. When Prabhupada left in 1977 and appointed or didn't appoint the 11 successor gurus, there was a big controversy about that. And all the GBC and temple presidents were going to meetings all over the country, and it was like a huge controversy. And I said, people, we don't pay this judgment or get it overturned, we're going to lose all of the temples, and there not only won't be temples, there won't be gurus either for them to live in. We're going to lose the whole thing. So by default, I was put in charge of it. In that case,
you had no experience. Did you have a trial lawyer working for you?
Yes, we had some trial lawyers that had been hired previously. And we found an appellate firm, some good, not very nice appellate lawyers, and I worked on the appeal. And we had a team of lawyers. I'll never forget that after the jury verdict, the court, you have to post a bond, or otherwise the plaintiff can execute on your property, seize your bank account, sell your property, take all your cars, take the marble on the altar and sell it. They have a right to do that if you don't do something like post a bond while you appeal it. But it was $10 million judgment. That would have been $1 million bond, and we didn't have that kind of money. Even though Sankirtan was going well, we didn't have that kind of money. So what happened was, instead of appointing a bond, the California Supreme Court appointed a receiver to manage and oversee our assets while the appeal was going on. And I remember vividly going down to a meeting with him, and he said, okay, give me the title to your property, give me the registration for all your vehicles, give me all your bank accounts and put me as the signer. I'm going to write all the checks. He's going to manage our religion. He's going to take over the religion and run it. If we didn't post the bond, but we didn't have the money, so we fought him. We fought the receiver at the same time. We were fighting this whole brainwashing case. So it was actually quite scary. I mean, Rameshwar was saying, if they come to take the deities, the blood will flow in the streets. Literally, I'm quoting there. And I was freaked out. What if Oh my God, I gotta do something about this. And devotees are gonna be committing suicide in front of the temple and attacking the police if they come to take the altar. So anyway, that went on for 20 years. My plan to come back to Gainesville was put on the back burner for the next 20 years or so. I just managed, I did other things, but my primary service was to manage the Robin George case,
And
which
what
we
happened?
did. What's that?
What happened 20 years later?
Well, it was a number of rulings over time, but the bottom line is that whole brainwashing thing, it was thrown out under the First Amendment. That you're brainwashed on the basis of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. The court didn't even give that a 2 seconds of thought. They said that's gone. So all Robin George's claims, all the brainwashing claims have been thrown out. But in the meantime, in the course of that case, all the scholars, all the religion scholars had rallied to our defense. Richardson and Bromley and Shoup and Dick Anthony and Larry Shin. Some of you may have heard of some of these people, but they were very prominent religion professors and sociology professors at respected universities, and they all came to support us. They all came forward and supported us and made their views known to the court. And it was like unbelievable all the support we got, so that by the time that case was over and we won, more or less, got rid of the brainwashing thing, we did still have a few $100,000 left over for the parents for being lied to and deceived about Robin's whereabouts. But we eventually settled it with the Georges at a great loss to them. It wasn't as if this was going to encourage other people to come and attack the Hare Krishna. And after the Robin George case, we were never attacked again. And at the same time, everyone recognized that ISKCON is not a cult. Krishna consciousness is not a cult. We were accepted as a unified religion, respected religion. And we were never attacked on that basis again after that was all over. Now, there was the case in Boston, the Susan Murphy case, which I also worked on. And that was the same thing as the Robin George case over only the Boston Temple. And we went up to the Massachusetts Supreme Court and we were 100% successful there. They didn't get any money. That was totally knocked out under the First Amendment. And prior to that, I said that's the one picture I sent to you, Prabhupada. In 1975, as part of this whole anti-cult hysteria, Trados and Adikeshwara had been indicted by a New York grand jury for brainwashing Basagopal, and it was Marilee Kreshauer. I can't remember her devotee name, but they were two devotees, and the New York grand jury indicted them for brainwashing. So at that time, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was running New York, or he was the GBC in New York. So, and also Rameshwara was, everybody was involved. But this, Prabhupada knew about this. And so Balabhanta and I went to New York because we were getting clobbered in the press. We were this evil cult. We had brainwashed these poor, innocent people. We were the worst people on the face of the earth. We were getting blasted in the New York media. So we were sent, Balabhanta and I were sent because of our political experience. Balabhanta had also run for mayor and some other government positions and had done well, and Prabhupada was very pleased with what he did and gave him a lot of encouragement. So we both went up there to New York to try to deal with the media. And Prabhupada was giving us instructions from India how to organize it. And he said to have a press conference, a big press conference with parents and Indian scholars, and then get our side of it out to the world. And so we organized the press conference at the Warwick Hotel in 1975. Every single newspaper, TV station, radio station in the city was at that news conference, that press conference. They were all there. It's the kind of thing you see in the movie where they, they're walking down the street and they're shoving a microphone in their face and asking, everybody's shouting and flashbulbs. It's exactly the way it was. It's exactly the way it was. They, New York media, they were yelling and shouting questions and, shouting, interrupting each other. But eventually they calmed down and we held our press conference and it was very successful. And then a short time after that, the judge threw out the brainwashing indictments. Judge, I can't remember his name. I would know it, but he was a very thoughtful and intelligent judge. And he just said, this is all nonsense. And he threw it all out. So after all this, we never got challenged again as a bona fide religion. And that was the end of the anti-cult era for all intents and purposes. But like I said, the silver lining in all that is that because of all the academic support that we had and all the professors that had come forward to protect us and speak out on our behalf, we were established for the first time as a bona fide religion. We weren't a cult. We weren't some evil, pernicious cult. We were actually a real bona fide religion, and that was all we ever dealt with again. We never had that problem anymore after that case.
Well, we are running out of time. I'm sorry. I'll bring you back. Listen,
I've had a long day, but that was an exciting time. I have to say that press conference in that hotel was the best time I've ever had in 50 years of being devoted. Being in New York with Balavanti, dealing with the media, going all these TV and radio shows, I had such a good time. Prabhupada was in India telling Tamal, now do this and now do that. And Tamal was saying, hey, this is what we got to do. It was like incredible. It was just amazing. It was wonderful. I was so happy being there. I was sorry to see it end. I would wish it would have kept going, but that delayed my return to Gainesville for another 20 years. It went my political career of getting some experience and coming back here to Gainesville and picking up where I left off 20 years down the line. It's too late. Then right after that, the Turley case came along. That took another 15 years living in LA. It's funny. I was on a North American GBC thing on a few weeks ago, and talking about bylaws and articles of incorporation, some technical issues. And I started, saying, well, in the Robin George case, they tried to link all the ISKCON temples into one big monolith by this alter ego theory that the GBC controlled all the temples. So if you did something in Boise, Idaho, you could go to LA and sell the property and collect the money for it. It's called the deep pocket, and that's what plaintiffs' lawyers look for. Where's the money? Usually that's an insurance company, but everybody was afraid of that. But I was mentioning how we had addressed that and gotten rid of that. It was no longer a threat. And then of course in the Turley case, which was the child abuse case, Turley did the same thing. Only this time he named Prabhupada as the leader of a RICO conspiracy, a worldwide RICO conspiracy. And even though on many occasions, even the Guru coolies asked him to drop Prabhupada as a defendant, he refused Turley. And he was going to drag Prabhupada's legacy through the mud in a jury trial in Dallas, Texas. One of the worst cities I'd ever had the misery of spending time in my life, with a steakhouse and a singles bar in every corner in those days. I said, that's not going to happen. They're not going to destroy Prabhupada's legacy. So therefore, we filed for Chapter 11. We went into bankruptcy. And we worked it out there. And Prabhupada was never tarnished. His legacy was never impaired. But for me personally, that went on for another 15 years dealing with that case. So that by that time I was an old man. They don't even remember who I am here in Dayton anymore. But to speak of coming back and running for political office again. But the Robin George case I enjoyed. That was a challenge because it was philosophical. It was Bhagavad Gita, defending our religion. But the Turley case, the child abuse case, that was no fun. That was terrible. That was a nightmare. But by Krishna's grace, we're able to come up with a legal strategy that we're able to get some compensation for the children that we brought into this movement. We were able to get them some compensation and save our temple from being liquidated, which is what would have happened if they had gone to trial and got a $40 or $50 million judgment. Again, we would have been wiped out. So we were able to deal with that issue. It wasn't the best solution. I would have liked to see the kids get a lot more money than they got, but they got just about everything we had. And we, the hard work of the Sankirtan devotees of building these temples over the decades is not lost also. We were able to save those assets. So it was painful and it was ugly, but it was worked out with the least amount of damage or pain and suffering. So that's that.
Well, that's some of it.
But the interesting thing was that when I was on this panel, getting back to that, and I was talking about the Robin George case and the alter ego stuff, and then the Turley case and this and that. Then afterwards, we got this note policy. People they didn't know what you were saying. What is this? They didn't understand the Robin George case and the Turley case. I said, what? Ain't that irrelevant? That was crucial part of this done history. So anyway, that was just interesting to see how you get old and you don't even realize it.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you to this forum, because except for some old fogies like myself and others, which I'm not going to mention, but out of the core, nobody knows this. Nobody knows. You say Susan Murphy, Robin George, they have no clue, absolutely no clue.
And
they only
to me,
know.
That's like, how can they not know?
Well, because it's not publicized. So again, I stand by it. I name you the unsung hero of our movement, that you actually defended tooth and nail Prabhupada's legacy and Prabhupada's movement. So on that note, at least for today, I think we should end, and we do thank you enormously for sharing this wealth of legal Gordian knots that you have somehow or other cut through and untangle. And actually, I'm going to invite the devotees who are present to personally give you their thanks. So please, devotees, unmute yourselves and tell them thank you.
Don't listen to Sarvatma. He always does it, don't listen to him. You don't have to do it. Don't worry about it. See, they're already signing off. I see them signing off.
They're not in charge anymore.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Hare Krishna.
It was absolutely mesmerizing.
Thank you so much. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Amarendra Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare
All glories to Radha Damodar.